For generations, one question has echoed quietly through locker rooms, late-night conversations, and anonymous searches typed into glowing screens. Does size actually matter? It sounds like a physical question, but it lives almost entirely in the mind. Because long before science ever examined it, culture had already assigned it meaning, worth, masculinity, status. And once an idea is repeated enough times, it begins to feel biological, even when it isn't. Across large scientific surveys involving tens of thousands of adults, a consistent pattern appears. Most men describe themselves as average, yet a significant portion remain dissatisfied with their size. At the same time, most women report satisfaction with their partner's size. The anxiety is not mutual. One man wrote anonymously online, "I've never had anyone complain, but I still felt like I was lacking. It was always in my head." A woman responded in a different forum, "I cared more about how connected I felt than anything physical. That's what made intimacy good." Science supports these experiences. Human sexual response is governed by a complex interaction between the nervous system, emotional safety, hormones, and psychological presence, not by measurements. Medical research repeatedly shows that size alone is a weak predictor of satisfaction. In fact, excessive focus on size often disrupts intimacy rather than enhancing it. When attention shifts from connection to performance, anxiety replaces presence, and when the mind is tense, the body follows. Yet despite this evidence, the obsession persists. Why? Because size stopped being about function and became symbolic, a proxy for confidence, a stand-in for worth. Men are rarely taught that their value is intrinsic. They are taught it must be demonstrated through performance, dominance, and comparison. And comparison is a game that never ends. The digital age intensified this pressure. What was once private became global. What was once rare became normalized. What was once fantasy became expectation. Media, particularly adult entertainment, social platforms, and algorithm-driven content, rewards extremes. Subtlety doesn't trend. Average doesn't go viral. One man described the effect simply, "I didn't realize how distorted my expectations were until I stepped back. I thought everyone was built like that." This distortion doesn't stop at insecurity. For some men, it leads to action. Across forums and online communities, men openly discuss using supplements, pills, injections, and even illicit drugs in hopes of gaining size, despite limited or non-existent scientific support. Many of these substances promise blood flow, temporary swelling, or exaggerated marketing claims. But medically, they offer no permanent structural change. In some cases, they introduce serious risks: cardiovascular strain, hormonal disruption, psychological dependence. One medical professional summarized it bluntly. There is no safe drug that permanently increases size. The risks often outweigh any perceived benefit. Yet desperation can override caution. Because when a trait is framed as central to identity, people will attempt to modify it, even at personal cost. Surgical procedures exist, but they are not simple solutions. Lengthening surgeries often involve cutting suspensory ligaments, which may alter appearance but not function, and sometimes reduce stability. Girth procedures carry risks of infection, uneven results, scarring, and long-term complications. Even among patients who undergo these procedures, satisfaction is not guaranteed. One patient reflected anonymously, "I thought it would fix how I felt. It didn't. The insecurity followed me." This reveals a deeper truth. When the issue is psychological, physical intervention rarely resolves it. Research consistently shows that men who perceive themselves negatively, regardless of actual size, report lower confidence and reduced satisfaction. Not because of anatomy, but because of perception. Confidence shapes experience. Men who feel secure are more present. Men who are present create stronger connection. And connection is what intimacy responds to. A woman explained it this way: "I could feel the difference when he was relaxed versus when he was overthinking. It changed everything." There is no universal preference. Scientific studies exploring attraction show wide variation across individuals. Some people have preferences, many don't. Most prioritize emotional safety, communication, and trust over physical traits. Desire is contextual, personal, dynamic. Fantasy does not equal fulfillment. And when size does matter, it matters narrowly, in terms of comfort, compatibility, or medical context. Not as a universal rule, not as a measure of masculinity, not as a determinant of worth. One woman shared honestly, "When it was too big, it was actually uncomfortable. We had to talk and adjust." That statement alone dismantles the myth. Because pleasure is not one-dimensional, and intimacy is not competitive. Long-term research on sexual satisfaction highlights the same predictors again and again. Communication, trust, emotional connection, mutual responsiveness. These factors consistently outweigh physical characteristics. A couple reflected after years together. "Once we started talking openly, intimacy stopped feeling like pressure and started feeling natural." So when people ask whether size actually matters, they are often asking something else. Am I enough? Am I desirable? Am I replaceable? Science answers quietly. Worth is not anatomical. Connection is not measurable. Presence cannot be compared. The real harm was never the question itself. It was the belief that value could be reduced to a number. Men were taught to measure instead of experience, to perform instead of feel, to compare instead of connect. And in doing so, they were distracted from what intimacy requires most, being fully present. So does size actually matter? In limited, specific physical contexts, sometimes. But as a predictor of confidence, satisfaction, or connection, the evidence is clear. And so are the voices. The real question was never about size, it was about value. And value was never measured in inches. But culture didn't create this insecurity by accident. For decades, masculinity was framed as something to prove, measured, ranked, compared. Advertising reduced intimacy to performance. Entertainment exaggerated anatomy. Pornography replaced connection with spectacle. And slowly a quiet fear took root. Not, am I loved? But, am I enough? Studies in sexual psychology show that arousal is not linear. It is contextual. It responds to safety, novelty, trust, and emotional presence. The brain, not the body, is the primary sexual organ. Neuroscientists have shown that anticipation activates more pleasure centers than stimulation alone, meaning desire begins long before touch. This is why long-term satisfaction correlates more strongly with communication than anatomy. Why novelty fades when emotional intimacy collapses. Why connection amplifies sensation, and why the question was never really about size. It was about belonging, about being chosen, about being wanted without conditions. Because intimacy was never designed to be measured, it was designed to be felt.